Hi everyone, I'm Troy, and I want to show you how to do a garter tab cast on. So what you're going to need is just your needles and your yarn, and you'll need to know a few bits of information. If your pattern calls for a garter tip cast on, it's going to have all this information for you. But if you are trying to just do a triangle shawl or something else like that, and you want to use the garter tab cast on in place of a different type of cast on, the information that you're going to need to know is your garter stitch edging, how many stitches that is, and how many starting stitches you'll need. So in my case, I'm going to be doing a shawl that has a 3-stitch garter edge on the top, and I have 4 beginning stitches. That's important here, and I'll tell you why that's important. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to cast on your 3 stitches, so the garter stitch edging, that the same number of stitches you need for that edge. In this case, I'm going to do 3 stitches. So it doesn't really matter which of your cast-ons you do, as long as it's one of the meatier cast-ons. So something like a long tail cast-on, a knitted cast-on, a cable cast-on. It doesn't really matter. You don't want to be doing a backwards E cast on. That's the one where you just wrap your thumb and you pick it up, because that one is a fairly thin cast on, and that type of cast on is really hard to pick up your stitches later. So I am going to be doing a long tail cast on because that's just my go-to cast on. And I'm going to cast on 3 stitches because that's, as I mentioned, this is how many stitches my garter edge is going to be, 3 stitches. So now what we need to do, so now the next piece of information that we needed, in my case, the 4 stitches that my starting stitches are going to be for this particular shawl, we need to be able to pick up 4 stitches along the side of our garter tab. And we want to pick up 1 stitch for every 2 rows of garter stitches. So in this case, I need to do 8 rows. Since I did the long tail cast on, since I've done the long tail cast on, my first row is already done. We don't want to pull that too tight because we're going to pick up those stitches later. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn my work, and I'm going to work 8 rows in garter stitch, meaning I knit every stitch. So in this case, you might be wanting to do a slipped selvage edge where you slip your stitches. I don't recommend doing that here. You can do that later on. All right. 1, 2, 3. One, 2, 3. So that's 3 rows. 4 rows. 5 rows. 6 rows. 7 rows. And 8 rows. Okay, so I'm actually, all right, so I've done 7 rows, and I'm going to do my final 8th row here for this particular garter tab cast on. So here is my 8th row, and you'll notice that I got a bit of curl in here. That's because my yarn is unbalanced. So what you'll want to do is, if you have an unbalanced yarn like mine, untwist it so that way you can see your garter stitch ridges here. So I've got one there, got one there, got one there, and I've got one there across the bottom, right here where my right thumb is. And then I've got my cast on stitches. So now what we want to do is we're going to pick up stitches across the side here equal to the number of starting stitches that we need outside of the border. So I need 4, so I'm going to pick up 4 stitches. So the first one I'm going to pick up is kind of in a weird place. So we've got the row below here. So this is the row, this is the stitch I just knit. This is the one that I knit into. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pick up both sides of those stitches here. So I've got both strands on my needle. It's a little tricky because you might try to lose that one there. So I've got both stitches on my needle here, and I'm going to knit this. And the reason why I'm knitting this one is because in order for me to pick up later, there's only, well, I'll explain why I'm picking up that stitch here momentarily, but that's the stitch that I like to pick up. And then I'm just going to pick up the next stitch in my garter tab, which is here. And then I'm going to rotate my stitch. The next one is, here's my garter ridge there, is these ones. So I picked up 3 stitches so far. And then I need to find my next ones. So they're right here. So I'm going to go and pick them up. Oop. There we go. Right here. And then finally, there's one more right here. So this is where it starts getting a little tricky. So I've picked up my 4 stitches along the side. So here's my 3 starter stitches. Here's the 4 stitches that I picked up. You're going to pick up one more stitch on the side and knit it. And I just dropped it. So there it is on the side. You're going to knit it right there. And then we're going to turn over and we're going to pick up stitches here on the side. So when you're casting on only 3 stitches, there's really only 2 spots for you to pick up your 3 stitches. So the reason why I picked up this stitch, the first stitch, so close to my other garter ridge here, is that because I'm picking this first stitch up on the side, it kind of equals out things here. Since there's only 2 really safe spots to pick up here, it also allows me to pick up that 3rd stitch. So I've got one right, whoop. Oh, I just lost my stitch. Yeah. So I really have 2 spots here. So what you'll kind of need to do is like re-rotate them and pull out your holes. So I've got one right there and I've got one right there. So I'm going to go ahead and insert my needle into that first hole. It's a little finicky. I'm going to knit it. And then I'm going to go back over to my second hole right here. Try not to cover what I'm doing here. There we go. And I'm going to knit it. All right. And there we go. So I have cast on my garter tab. So there's my 3 garter stitches. Here's the 4 stitches that I picked up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, looks like I have 2 stitches here, but I think my tail got caught in there. So we're going to count that as 1 stitch. And then there's the last 2 stitches. So the final thing that you'll want to do, it's usually dictated by your pattern, but what I'm going to be doing here, since my pattern is a garter stitch and it uses rest rows, I am actually going to go and I'm going to knit. Make sure I'm not using my tail. I am going to, oh, that's the tail. I'm going to knit 3, because that's my garter edge here. So 1, 2. And then I'm just going to find the actual yarn over stitch here. So it's that one I need. Pull that tight. Okay. Actually, it's the other one. Pull that tight. There we go. Now that I fixed that stitch, so there's first 2. So I'm knitting those first 3 stitches there, and then I'm going to purl these middle 4 ones. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to knit these last 3. And that is the Garter Tab Cast-on. So now I am ready to continue working here. So you may want to start using stitch markers at this point, or actually in the last row if you want to put them. So when I'm using stitch markers for yarn this fine, I'm using bulb pins. And I'm just using 3 stitches here, a stitch marker there, and then I'll put a stitch marker in between each of my repeats. In this case, I'll have a stitch marker here, 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 and here. But you don't need to go quite so gung-ho in the first few until you've got more stitches on your needles. Then you can add your stitch markers in, and it won't be so confusing to look at. I hope you found this tutorial useful. And if you want to substitute this cast on here for any of your triangle shawls or any other work that starts in the center back and you're doing increases all along the back, so you have a straight edge there at the top. I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.